Well, welcome to the Wilmette Institute Podcast Series. I'm your host, Emily Chou. In each episode, we're going to explore vital issues that have profound implications for humanity, such as race unity, education, environmental stewardship, and social change. Through thoughtful conversation, we'll be joined by scholars, practitioners, and change makers who help us connect ideas to actual having meaningful action. The Wilmette Institute is an online learning community that's grounded in an evolving Baha'i framework for collective learning. And our mission is to equip learners to contribute to social transformation and public discourse, bringing spiritual insight with intellectual rigor. So thank you for being part of this journey. Let's begin. Our guest today is Nika. Nika, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, yeah. My name is Nika Esmailizadeh. I'm a first grade teacher in the LA area. This is my fourth year teaching first grade, and I took a course through the Wilmette Institute about 1 year ago.
Nice. I'm so glad to have you here. Nika's also one of my very close friends. Our topic that we're going to talk about today is about universal participation in the generation and dissemination of knowledge, a concept that implies that we all have a role to play in the advancement of society. So, Nika, I'm wondering, do you have a story or maybe some experience to share about this concept?
Oh my goodness. I could talk a lot about this concept. I feel like universal participation is so central in the classroom and in the field of education. And I've been thinking about this a bit, maybe less of a story, but really thinking about how participation goes beyond just one student being present at a school, but thinking about all the players in that child's life. So, like the parents, the siblings, community members that play a role, aunts, uncles, all of them really contribute to what universal participation looks like in a child's life. So I don't know, I've been reflecting on one of my students a year ago who entered the school year and said, I don't know how to read. And he had this identity as a learner that he just couldn't read, right? And by the end of the year, he couldn't put a book down. He just was reading all the time. But that's not something that happened overnight. It started with a conversation with him about what's the purpose of reading? Why does reading not only help you, but as you're learning yourself to read, it contributes to the world you're living in? And how can reading be a tool or like a super power that helps you advance in the world that we're living in? So that's what motivated him to want to start to learn to read. But then there were all these players that played a part in contributing into helping him get to that point. So having regular conversations with his parents, his siblings playing a role in that. Different staff members and my coworkers were supporting that. And it really it took a village, right? And so it was maybe less of a story, but just thinking about how every single one of those players played a role in supporting him in that process.
Yeah. That's so great. And seeing how also like you're also able to identify what's the factor that is contributing to him, maybe his motivation or not wanting to read, and then being able to address that directly and saying like, actually when we have service or like a reason to want to do these kinds of things at the center of why we do it, it actually makes it so much more easy to, it's so much easier to actually try towards this kind of goal that we have.
Yeah, I feel like that motivation when it's like oriented around contributing to something greater than them, that motivation just grows so much stronger rather than it just being like, well, you need to learn how to read because it's a standard, right? Like it grows so much.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I have similar conversations with some of my students. I'm also a teacher in elementary school, and we had like career day recently. And I feel like when you talk about careers as in like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And people say this or that. And a lot of it's geared towards like, how much money can I make versus it being like, we had a conversation about like when you're older and when you're now, like when you're this age at this current stage of your life too, like if you are thinking about how you can help others with whatever career you have, then that actually gives you a lot more purpose and like the reason why you want to do the things that you want to do. And with
Hmm.
that in mind, they had different ideas of like, oh, what do you actually want to be and how does that actually contribute to society? So
Yeah,
nice to have that
absolutely.
idea as a little kid too.
Definitely.
So last fall you took the course from the Wilmette Institute about transforming education. What kind of led you to even want to take the course in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think beyond wanting to just study and getting to study with some of my friends, it was so nice to It was my third year teaching, and I felt like I had gotten into the flow. And like it had been 3 years since I had taken a course in from my master's program and when I was getting my credential. And I don't know, sometimes it kind of just feels like you can stay stagnant as an educator. And like you have a framework in which you're working in, and you hold these like principles and these attitudes true. But then being able to study and be in conversation with others really actually makes you implement it better into your own practice. So I really thought it'd be nice to just take a course, kind of refresh myself in why I wanted to go into the field of education. What are the principles that I hold true, but then also how do I take those principles and actually put it into my classroom, right? So yeah, I want to just take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. I feel similarly like a little bit before Nika, I took my first course and yeah, similar. I was like, I want to learn about how do these principles actually apply into in my career and then also in my service and also in like all the different aspects of life. So I'm curious if you feel like there were any concepts that really resonated you from the course that you can actually apply in your classroom.
Yeah, a lot. Okay, so I think there were a few concepts that stood out. One being, we were talking about like what are the foundational beliefs in education, and we were talking about this quote, regard man as a mine rich in gems, and education alone can cause it to reveal its treasures and then like contribute to the world, right? So thinking about students as these limitless potential like treasure mines is one that really just like reframes how you view a student rather than like, oh, this student is struggling in reading, or this student is so good at math, or this student can be so helpful. Like there's so many things that we want to look at. But then also remembering that there was this quote that we read and it said, training in morals and good conduct is far more important than book learning. Right. And I think that really, really stands out because when there is like social emotional conflict in the classroom, you see how much it takes away from like that academic learning. And so I think it really, studying that quote really helped me think about the full nature of education, and that when we're in the classroom, of course, we want to do the book learning and like, the state standards tell us like we need to address this, this, and this, and this, but you can't address those things if moral and good conduct isn't being addressed as well. So that was really, really wonderful to like think about a little bit more together in the class. And then there was a document we studied from the Baha'i international community. And that document helped us think a little bit about what it looks like to shift culture to support universal and meaningful education. And then there were five different concepts that we studied in it, but there were two that stood out to me. One being that the means of social change has to be consistent with the ends. So what does it look like? Like if this is what I want my students to do, if I want my students to actively contribute to the world that they're living in, what are the means by which I'm doing that? I can't just say it and then it happens overnight, right? There has to be things that happen. And then another one being that service to society must be considered an essential component of education. And so then that really made me think about, how am I letting that happen in my classroom, right? Like, I can't just say, now go and try this, but like, how am I creating opportunities in my classroom for them to become contributors of change, or like have service opportunities in the classroom so that they feel that impact, and they see that twofold purpose, like as they themselves are learning and growing, that's contributing to the world around them, but also as they're contributing to the world, it's impacting them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like the quote you mentioned at the beginning too, I'm seeing it. I think like the school I was teaching at in California and similar to yours, like you have a lot of freedom. You're able to learn about how to teach these kinds of things, and you can like communicate well with your colleagues and see how you can address the standards, but doing it in like a way that is more consistent with like the means and the ends are more consistent. And I feel like when I was teaching at this school, I was able to like explore that a lot more. And then I see like the other side where now my school's so rigorous that I have to really hold to like scripts and lesson plans and the pacing guides of these certain things. And it is so much more difficult to teach these things of like the moral is more important than the material. And right now it's so focused on material, and you just see the lack in just the system. Like the kids can't function as well. There's so much pressure put on them academically. Um, we feel a ton of pressure as teachers. We don't feel like we can kind of pause and then, teach the underlying things. There's not as much empowerment within the teachers to actually like think in this way. And you see like the stark contrast, I think, in how the outcomes are too, like academically and everything too. It's also worse. So I think that is so important. And then yeah, when you talked about service too, like, or could you give maybe some examples of like how you allow them to serve, like as a 6-year-old?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's like a variety of ways. I think one that was really sweet that we did towards the end of last year was that after we had spent, the whole school year really advancing as readers and trying to become more fluent in our reading abilities, we then told the kids that they were going to create a special resource for the kindergartners, so just the year below them, and that they were going to read a book that they chose, and they recorded an audiobook for the kindergartners. And that was a resource that they were able to share with them because maybe the kindergartners aren't able to read it fluently yet. So they were just so excited. And then being able to go and actually share it with the kindergartners and not just like send it over to the teacher, right? But having the kindergartners come in and having the first graders take leadership and listen to the audiobook with the kids and go through it. It was like a really, really sweet moment where they felt it firsthand. They were like, we did that. Like we got to create that space for them. Yeah, that was really, really wonderful.
Aw, that is really, really sweet. And seeing like the joy that comes with like putting a name to what they're doing, like this is contributing to the school, it's contributing to the next generation. I mean, a year younger than them, but like having that idea that we have abilities even starting from so young, we still have the ability to contribute. Like that also links back to like universal participation. Like every member of society at every age of their life has something to contribute. And currently, if we aren't, you know, using all of these different potentials that we have in every human being, and we just view kids as an empty cup that needs to be filled with knowledge or um, understanding, then we don't actually get to see the joys of the things that they actually can contribute to society.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even now having the kindergartners at that point, now they're in my first grade class, and you can see that like they were really touched by that sentiment and the motivation to learn and try to do it again this year for the kindergartners. It's like they're not just empty vessels that they're like learning. I'm like, we want to learn to read so that we can create resources like this and we can go and do this. And they're motivated. They have that desire because they want to contribute to the school culture and the school community.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious, have you seen any other ways that universal participation has, as you like generate knowledge or as people are participating, how else have you seen that in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, I think early on we have tried to have conversations in the classroom about what it looks like for every single person to be playing a part in our learning and what it means for us to be actively engaged when we're learning so that we recognize like when one person isn't there or when one person isn't like focused or contributing, it's really impacting the rest of the class. So you'll see kids like try to like invite people to participate when they might not be like fully engaged, or maybe they're not fully there for that lesson, or when a student walks into the class they're so eager to see them because they're happy that they're here, right? We don't want them to be like, oh, this person's here, like let's not acknowledge it. We want them to be feel invited and welcomed into the class. But then also inviting community members and inviting their families to come and play an active role in the classroom because, like I mentioned earlier, we know when we're thinking about universal participation, it just can't be a parent, a child, and whatever happens from 8 to 3 is that, right? But inviting all the family members as much as we can to play a role in that, and that we have stuff to learn from them, and that the parents can learn from the students, and that I'm learning from the students, and that it's not just a one-way street, right? We're all learning from each other, and there's different ways in that, and really taking moments or taking time to like highlight when I learned from them so that they recognize it rather than just like brushing past it. I feel like yeah, having everyone there, them feeling fully part like fully engaged and fully part of this process really has enhanced like this idea of universal participation in our class.
Yeah, that's really great. And inviting many different stakeholders into this kind of conversation too.
Yeah.
Um, Just before we go, I have one more question. I'm just wondering, for anyone who's listening, do you feel like there's any actionable steps that people could take based on things that you've learned?
Oh my goodness. Yes, for sure. I think one thing I really valued from this class was that one of the overarching projects was actually an invitation to go and act and to engage in conversation with my with someone else who's involved in the field of education, right? It was like someone in the field of education. And that project, at first I was like, I don't know who I'm going to talk to. Coincidentally, like I work in a school, there's full of educators, and I was able to take the courage and have a conversation with my colleague. And I think that like having that conversation with my colleague really helped be on the same page about things. Like when she recognized that these are the goals that I have for my classroom and the goals that I have for the school, she was helping think of ways that we could support that goal, right? And so, like that audiobook example that I shared earlier, that was a collaboration between the two of us that we were able to do for the upcoming kindergartners, right? And I think like my biggest takeaway from the class was we have to engage in conversation with one another. If I'm thinking these things, things
Mhm.
won't change, right? But if I'm sharing with the parents that are in my classroom or with my coworkers or whoever it is, that this is what I'm hoping to bring about when I think about the field of education, then that's when partnership and action takes place and we're able to really go hand in hand and create that action. So I really valued that project at the as the overarching project for the course because it really encouraged me to have a conversation and it's now been an ongoing conversation. Like it didn't just stop because the course is over.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel very similarly. I hadn't thought about even the importance of having conversations before, taking some of the courses from Wilmette and understanding that like our conversations truly do lead to this kinds of transformation that we're trying to see. Like you having these conversations with your co-teacher or your colleague, that helps impact an entire cohort of students who are then impacting, the next class and the next class and their families, and it bridges much larger than that. So that's really great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed hearing about how you've tried to apply these principles in the classroom and then also how the conversations have kind of left a bigger impact. So, anything
Thank
else you'd like to?
you. No, thank you so much. Yeah, I really valued the course through the Wilmette Institute, and I hope that I can take some more. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So Nika took the education course, but there's also courses on, like we mentioned, race unity and sustainability and social change. So these are all wonderful topics that we'll be exploring in the podcast.